you're wrong, but because their system is wired to escape when it feels needed. This is where most people lose themselves. They beg silently. They wait. They overanalyze. They make their world smaller, hoping the other person will return and make it whole again. And without realizing it, they hand over all their power. Desire doesn't grow in that space. Respect doesn't grow there either. What grows is anxiety. And anxiety is invisible, but it's felt. There is a different way, one that doesn't require chasing, one that doesn't require pretending you don't care, one that doesn't punish you for having feelings. But it does require something most people are too afraid to do. It requires you to stop orienting your entire emotional world around someone who chose distance. It requires you to become steady instead of reactive, grounded instead of grasping. When you do that, something strange happens. The dynamic shifts, not immediately, not dramatically, but internally first. Your nervous system calms, your identity recenters, and that calm creates a silence that feels different, not empty, not desperate, but solid, self-contained. And avoidants feel that difference even if they can't name it. This is not about manipulation. It's about alignment. When you stop chasing and start standing, you send a message without words. I am safe with myself. I am not disappearing to be noticed. I am not shrinking to be chosen. And that message does something powerful. It removes the fear response. It replaces pressure with space. And space is the only environment where an avoidant can feel curiosity instead of threat. If you stay with this, if you absorb this fully, you'll realize the silence isn't the end of the story. It's the turning point. Not because they suddenly change, but because you do. And that change is the one thing that can reopen a door you thought was permanently closed. That door doesn't reopen because you wait longer or hurt quieter. It reopens when the emotional gravity shifts. Right now, everything in you wants relief. Relief from not knowing, relief from the ache, relief from the feeling of being left behind. But chasing relief is what keeps you stuck. Avoidants don't move toward emotional hunger, they move away from it. And the harder you want them back, the more your energy says you're not standing on solid ground. This is where urgency matters. Not urgency to reach out, but urgency to reclaim yourself. Because every day you stay frozen in hope, you reinforce a version of yourself that revolves around absence, and absence should never define you. The ND adapts quickly. If you let this state linger, your brain learns to associate love with anxiety, and once that wiring settles in, even if they return, the dynamic is already damaged. You don't need closure to move forward. Closure is an illusion, sold to people who think peace comes from answers. Peace comes from stability, from knowing you will be okay whether someone stays or goes. That certainty is rare, and rarity creates value. Avoidants are drawn to emotional environments that feel calm, self-contained, and unpredictable in a grounded way. Not cold, not distant, just no longer orbiting them. This is where belief has to replace longing. Belief that your life expands when you stop shrinking it for someone else. Belief that walking forward doesn't erase what you felt. It redeems it. When you stop organizing your days around their silence, something shifts inside you. Your posture changes, your thoughts slow down, your emotional tone steadies. That steadiness becomes visible, even when you say nothing. The stakes are higher than whether they come back. This is about whether you rebuild yourself around self-trust or stay trapped in self-doubt. One path keeps you replaying memories, analyzing timing, waiting for signs. The other path builds momentum. Momentum doesn't need permission. It doesn't wait to be chosen. It creates movement so strong that others feel it without understanding why. Avoidants don't respond to words. They respond to energy. When your energy stops asking and starts existing, their nervous system registers something unfamiliar. The pressure is gone. The emotional demand is gone. What's left is curiosity. And curiosity is the only doorway they ever walk back through. This is not instant. And that's why it works. Because real change isn't performative. It's embodied. You don't pretend you're okay. You build a life where okay becomes real again. You invest in routines that stabilize you. You reconnect with parts of yourself you neglected while trying to be close to someone who feared closeness. You stop narrating your pain to yourself and start directing your attention outward, forward, upward. As this happens, the story they told themselves about you starts to crack, not because you confront it, but because you no longer fit it. You're no longer the person waiting, explaining, holding space at your own expense. You're someone who continued living fully even after being left in silence. That creates cognitive dissonance, and the avoidant mind hates unresolved tension. This is where belief becomes power, not belief that they will return, but belief that you are grounded enough either way. That belief frees you. And freedom is magnetic. When you no longer need the outcome finally has space to change, not because you engineered it, but because you stopped blocking it with fear. Stay here, stay steady, stay anchored in the version of yourself that doesn't abandon themselves just because someone else did. The urgency is our eel, not to get them back, but to not lose yourself. When you choose that path fully, something irreversible happens. You become someone who is no longer defined by avoidance, silence, or withdrawal. And from that place, whether they return or not, you win. Winning doesn't always look like celebration. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it looks like choosing not to reach for what once felt familiar, because the real test begins after you feel strong again. That's when patterns try to pull you back. That's when the old urge whispers that maybe this time will be different if you explain more, give more, bend more. And this is where everything either changes for good or resets back to pain. Strength without discipline collapses. Calm without boundaries fades. You are not here to repeat the same cycle with better words. You are here to end it. That means you no longer reward distance with emotional availability. You no longer prove loyalty to someone who chose absence. This isn't punishment. It's self-respect. And self-respect is the one language an avoidant never forgets. At some point, they feel it. Not as longing at first, but as confusion. The emotional script they relied on no longer works. You aren't reacting. You aren't chasing. You aren't waiting. You're moving forward with a steadiness that feels unfamiliar to them, that unsettles the dynamic. And unsettlement creates awareness. Awareness is dangerous to avoidance, because once someone notices what they lost, they can't unsee it. They begin to remember not the fights or the distance, but the safety you once offered. And now that safety feels different, scarcer, stronger, no longer guaranteed. The human brain values what it can't easily access, and for the first time you are no longer easily accessible. This is where urgency sharpens. Because if you break now, if you reach back too soon, you confirm the old story. You confirm that silence still controls you, that distance still defines your behavior, and that erases all the progress you've made internally. This moment demands resolve, not hardness, not coldness, but clarity. Clarity says you don't need to convince anyone to see your worth. Clarity says connection must meet you where you stand, not where you used to beg. Clarity says love that requires self-erasure isn't love, it's survival. And you are done surviving. The shift becomes visible in small ways. Your energy no longer spikes at the thought of them. Your days are no longer structured around hope or dread. You start trusting your own rhythm again. That trust radiates. People respond differently to you. Conversations feel lighter. Your presence feels grounded. And that contrast becomes impossible to ignore. If they return, it won't be with certainty. It will be tentative, careful, curious. And that's where the final choice appears. Not the choice they make, the choice you make. Whether you step back into the old dynamic or hold the new ground you built. Whether you prioritize chemistry or consistency. Whether you choose familiarity or peace. This isn't about being unreachable. It's about being unavailable to chaos. You don't close your heart, you protect it. You allow connection only where there is mutual effort, mutual regulation, mutual respect. That standard filters everything, and that filter keeps you safe. The most powerful outcome is not reunion, it's transformation. Because when you truly shift, the fear that once controlled you loses its grip. Silence no longer terrifies you. Distance no longer defines your value. You become someone who can walk away without self-betrayal and stay without self-abandonment. This is the point of no return. Not because something ends, but because something solid begins. You stop measuring your worth by who stays. You stop negotiating with people who fear closeness. You become someone whose presence is calm, whose absence is felt, and whose boundaries are non-negotiable. From this place, everything changes. The way you love, the way you choose, the way you move through uncertainty. And that change is permanent. Because once you learn how to stay with yourself, no one ever has the power to disappear from you again. When you reach this place, the world feels sharper, not louder, clearer. You begin to see how much of your energy you once gave away trying to be understood by someone who was never available to understand you. That realization stings, but it also frees you because awareness ends illusions. ND illusions are what kept you stuck. You no longer romanticize their distance. You no longer interpret silence as mystery. You see it for what it is, a limitation, not yours. The moment you internalize that truth, your body responds. Your breathing changes, your shoulders drop, the tension you carried for weeks, maybe months, begins to release. And in that release, strength returns. This is where people around you start noticing a difference. Not because you announce it, but because you're no longer leaking urgency. You listen differently. You speak with intention. You stop over-explaining. And when you do speak, your words land with weight. That weight comes from alignment, from no longer needing approval to feel stable. The urgency now is internal, not to be chosen, but to protect this version of yourself. Because once you feel this grounded, going back feels impossible. You realize how much effort it took to stay connected to someone who kept pulling away, and you promise yourself you won't pay that cost again. This is not bitterness, it's discernment. You still care. You're just no longer willing to sacrifice your nervous system for proximity. You understand that real connection doesn't require anxiety to sustain it. Real connection feels calm, predictable, safe, and anything that constantly destabilizes you is not love. It's a pattern. If they reappear now, the dynamic is different, not because you changed tactics, but because you changed identity. You are no longer the person who waits in emotional limbo. You are no longer impressed by attention without consistency. You don't rush to reattach. You observe, you feel, you choose, and that choice is power, not power over them, power over yourself. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop mistaking longing for compatibility. You finally trust your own internal signals instead of overriding them for hope. At this level, even the idea of them not returning loses its sting. Because your life feels full again. Your days have structure. Your mind has direction. Your emotions have room to move without being trapped in one story. You're not avoiding pain. You've just learned how to hold it without letting it define you. This is what people mean when they say healing changes everything. It doesn't erase the past, it reframes it. You see how the connection served its purpose. It showed you where you abandoned yourself. It revealed the cost of ignoring your own needs. And it pushed you toward a version of yourself that no longer tolerates emotional uncertainty disguised as depth. From here, your standards become quiet but firm. You don't argue them, you live them. Anyone who enters your space feels the difference immediately. There is warmth, but there is also structure. Openness, but not overexposure. Care without self-sacrifice. That balance is rare. And rarity attracts attention. Whether they come back or not becomes irrelevant. Because the outcome no longer defines you. You do. You've built something internal that can't be taken away by silence or distance. You've learned how to stay present without chasing, how to be open without losing yourself, how to love without fear running the show. This is the real shift, not getting someone to return, but becoming someone who never begs for emotional safety again, someone who can stand in uncertainty without collapsing, someone who chooses connection from wholeness, not from lack. And once you step fully into that version of yourself, the story completes itself. Not with a dramatic ending, but with a quiet certainty. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer proving. You are no longer shrinking. You are here, grounded, clear, and impossible to disappear from. Now the final layer settles in, and it's deeper than confidence. It's conviction. You stop hoping the universe will reward your patience. You realize patience without direction is just delay. What changes your life is decision. The decision to no longer negotiate your worth with people who can't meet you emotionally. The decision to stop interpreting mixed signals as potential. The decision to choose alignment over attachment. This is where the nervous system rewires. Your body learns that safety doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself consistently. That shift is subtle, but it's permanent. You respond instead of react. You pause instead of pursue. You let things reveal themselves instead of forcing clarity. That restraint is not passive, it's powerful. You begin to notice how silence feels different now. It no longer echoes. It doesn't pull you inward. It just exists, neutral. And that neutrality is freedom. Because when silence loses its emotional charge, no one can use it to control you again. You stop filling gaps that aren't yours to fill. You stop chasing people who are comfortable watching you run. The urgency sharpens here. Not because time is running out, but because you finally see what's at stake. Every time you abandon this grounded version of yourself for familiarity, you pay with peace. Every time you ignore your instincts to keep someone close, you teach your system that chaos is acceptable. And you are done with that lesson. Your standards are no longer reactions to pain. They're reflections of self-respect. You don't demand reassurance. You observe behavior. You don't threaten to leave. You simply don't stay where effort is one-sided. You don't explain why consistency matters. You live in a way that requires it. This is when the dynamic fully collapses and rebuilds. Anyone who relied on your availability without accountability feels the loss, not because you vanished, but because you changed the terms. You became steady. And steadiness exposes instability. It forces people to either rise or retreat, and either outcome serves you. If they return now, it's not to escape loneliness. It's to reconnect with something they felt but didn't know how to hold. And even then, you are no longer rest by return alone. You look for presence, regulation, follow-through. You understand that real closeness isn't dramatic, it's consistent, and consistency is non-negotiable. This is where belief expands beyond one person. You start trusting that your future connections will feel different because you are different. You won't confuse intensity with intimacy again. You won't mistake potential for effort. You won't stay in emotional limbo hoping it turns into certainty. You are building a life where certainty begins within you. The story no longer revolves around who left. It revolves around who you became because they did. You see how that moment of loss forced you inward, how it stripped away illusions, how it demanded growth instead of avoidance. And you realize something powerful. That pain didn't weaken you. It clarified you. From this place, action feels natural. You move with intention. You say no without guilt. You say yes without fear. You invest your energy where it's reciprocated. You rest without anxiety. You connect without overextending. And every choice reinforces the same message to your system. I am safe with myself. That belief compounds. It changes the way people meet you. It changes the way you love. It changes what you tolerate. You no longer need dramatic endings or perfect closures. You create closure by choosing alignment over attachment, peace over possibility, truth over hope. This is not the end of wanting connection. It's the end of abandoning you. Ourself to get it. You still open your heart. You just don't give it to someone who can't stay present inside it. And that discernment is the real transformation. You didn't lose someone. You found yourself, and once that happens, nothing can disappear from you again. And now the truth becomes unavoidable. You were never meant to wait in emotional uncertainty. You were never meant to shrink your needs to keep someone calm. You were never meant to earn consistency by being patient enough. That belief kept you stuck. Releasing it sets you free. This is where resolve turns into action, quiet action, internal action. You stop scanning for signs. You stop reading meaning into breadcrumbs. You stop measuring days by whether they cross your mind. Not because you forced detachment, but because your attention finally has somewhere better to go. back to you, back to your life, back to what grows when you show up fully. Your energy now has direction. It no longer leaks into fantasy or regret. It fuels routines that strengthen you, habits that stabilize you, choices that align you. And alignment is powerful because it compounds. One grounded decision leads to another. One boundary strengthens the next. One moment of self-trust rebuilds an entire identity. This is when urgency reaches its peak, because you understand how easy it would be to fall back. One message, one memory, one emotional pull, and you know exactly what it would cost. Your peace, your clarity, your hard-won stability. Awareness sharpens you. It keeps you present. It keeps you intentional. You are no longer ruled by hope. You are guided by standards. Hope without standards is dangerous. Standards without fear are liberating. You don't need promises. You need patterns. You don't need reassurance. You need reliability. And you don't need someone to come back to feel complete. You need to stay where you are to remain whole. This is the level where everything aligns. Your mind stops racing. Your body feels steady. Your emotions move without overwhelming you. You can miss someone without losing yourself. You can remember without reopening wounds. You can feel without spiraling. That emotional regulation is strength. And strength is attractive in every sense of the word. People respond to you differently now. Not because you demand more, but because you accept less. Less inconsistency, less confusion, less emotional labor without return. That quiet filter removes what never fit and makes room for what can meet you properly. You don't chase alignment, you create space for it. If the avoidant never returns, you still win, because the version of you that needed them to come back no longer exists. If they do return, the ground rules are different, not spoken, lived. You are no longer available to dynamics that require you to disappear emotionally to keep the connection alive. This is where belief locks in. Not belief in outcomes, but belief in self-leadership. You trust yourself to walk away if dead. You trust yourself to stay only where there is mutual presence. You trust yourself to handle discomfort without betraying your values. That trust is unshakable. The story reaches its deepest point here. You see how far you've come from the moment silence felt like rejection. Silence now feels neutral, sometimes even peaceful, because you no longer associate it with abandonment. You associate it with space. And space is not the enemy. Space is where clarity lives. You are no longer trying to be unforgettable. You are being undeniable, not loud, not dramatic, just solid, rooted, clear. And that presence changes everything. It changes how people approach you. It changes how you connect. It changes what you tolerate. And it ensures you never lose yourself again in the process of wanting someone else. This is not a temporary mindset. It's a permanent shift. Once you experience life without emotional chasing, you can't unsee the difference. You can't go back to bargaining for consistency. You can't unfeel the peace of standing firmly in yourself. What you've built here matters. Protect it. Choose it daily. Let it guide every connection you allow into your life. Because this version of you doesn't beg, doesn't wait, doesn't chase. This version chooses. And that choice changes the ending of every story that comes after. You are no longer defined by who pulled away. You are defined by who stayed. And the most important one never left. And this is where the meaning of everything sharpens. Not as an idea, but as a decision you live by. You stop framing your growth as a reaction to what happened. It's no longer about what they did or didn't do. It's about who you refuse to become again. Someone who overextends. Someone who waits in emotional suspense. Someone who confuses patience with self-abandonment. The urgency now is sacred, because comfort will try to pull you back into old patterns. Familiar pain is seductive. It feels known. It feels safe in a twisted way. And this is the moment where many people fall back, not because they're weak, but because they underestimate how strong old conditioning can be. You don't underestimate it anymore. You stay alert. You understand that every interaction is a vote for the kind of life you're building. Every yes either reinforces alignment or erodes it. Every no either protects your peace or delays it. There is no neutral ground anymore. And that clarity makes your choices cleaner. Faster, more honest. You stop explaining your boundaries to people who benefit from you not having them. You stop justifying your needs to those who minimize them. You stop arguing with someone's capacity. Capacity is revealed in behavior, always. And once you accept that, confusion disappears. What replaces it is focus. You focus on becoming emotionally fluent, on recognizing when attraction is pulling you toward instability instead of growth, on slowing down enough to feel whether something expands you or drains you. That awareness, see, hang is everything. It turns intuition from a whisper into a guide. This is where belief becomes embodied. You don't just believe you deserve consistency. You act like it. You don't just value presence. You require it. You don't romanticize struggle anymore. You prioritize ease. And ease no longer feels boring. It feels safe. It feels real. The stakes keep rising because now you know the cost of ignoring yourself. You've lived it, and you won't repeat it. Not for chemistry, not for history, not for potential. You choose what's actual, what's available, what's mutual. And that choice narrows the field, but what remains is solid. People who can't meet you here will fall away naturally, not with conflict, with distance. And this time, distance doesn't wound you. It clarifies. It shows you exactly who is aligned with the old version of you and who can meet the new one. That discernment is priceless. You move differently now. You don't rush emotional intimacy. You let trust build through consistency. You don't project futures. You observe patterns. You don't give access because someone shows interest. You give access when they show stability. That patience is powerful. It filters out chaos before it reaches your heart. At this point, even love feels different. It's not anxious, it's not consuming. It doesn't make you abandon your life to maintain connection. It integrates, it supports, it adds, and you realize that anything that requires you to disappear emotionally is not intimac. It's imbalance. You carry this knowing forward into every connection, every decision, every moment where old habits try to resurface. You pause, you choose yourself again and again and again. Each time the choice gets easier, each time your nervous system trusts you more. This is how identity solidifies, not through declarations, but through repetition. You repeatedly show yourself that you will not betray your own needs for temporary relief. You repeatedly choose clarity over fantasy. You repeatedly act in alignment even when it's uncomfortable. That consistency builds something unbreakable. And now the story completes its arc, not with reunion, not with revenge, but with sovereignty. You stand in yourself fully, without waiting, without chasing, without proving. You know who you are. You know what you require. You know what you will no longer tolerate. From this place, everything you allow into your life must rise to meet you. And if it doesn't, you let it go without violence, without drama, without self-doubt. Because you are no longer afraid of being alone. You are afraid of abandoning yourself again. That fear protects you. It keeps you awake. It keeps you honest. It keeps you aligned. And alignment is the real power, the kind that changes your life quietly and completely. You didn't just survive the silence. You used it. You let it shape you into someone grounded, discerning, and whole. And once you reach this place, there is no going back. Only forward. Only epper. Only truer. This is who you are now. And this is where everything begins. What comes next is commitment. Not to an idea, but to a way of being you refuse to compromise. You stop treating growth like a phase and start living it as a standard. This is where many turn back. Not because the path is wrong, but because it asks for consistency. And consistency exposes everything that no longer belongs. You begin to feel the difference in your body first. Less tension, less scanning, less bracing for disappointment. Your system learns a new rhythm, calm without numbness, openness without anxiety, strength without armor. That balance is rare because it's earned, not borrowed from validation. The urgency now is about protection, not walls, but discernment. You protect your time, your attention, your emotional bandwidth. You realize how powerful attention is and how dangerous it can be when given away carelessly. Where you place it determines what grows, and you are done feeding dynamics that drain you. You no longer wait for proof that someone cares. You watch how they show up. You don't fill in gaps with hope. You let behavior speak. Silence becomes information. Consistency becomes attraction. Effort becomes the baseline. This isn't cynicism, it's clarity. There is a moment when the old reflex flares up. The urge to explain yourself, to soften your stance, to make it easier for someone else to stay, and you catch it. You breathe. You don't act on it. That pause changes everything. It proves to you that you are in control now, not of others, but of yourself. Control turns into confidence, quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't announce itself. You stop overthinking messages. You stop rehearsing conversations that may never happen. You trust that what's meant to meet you will do so without forcing. That trust frees enormous energy. You redirect that energy into building a life that feels solid. Your days have structure, your goals have momentum, your relationships feel reciprocal, you laugh more, you sleep deeper. You notice how peace feels unfamiliar at first, then addictive. You choose it again and again. The stakes are clear now. Every time you ignore your standards, you weaken the foundation you've built. Every time you honor them, you reinforce it. This is not about perfection, it's about integrity. About matching your actions to your values even when no one is watching. You stop telling yourself stories about why someone can't show up. You stop rescuing potential. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You respect reality, and reality respects you back. It gives you cleaner connections. It gives you honest endings. It gives you space to grow. If someone enters your life now, they meet you where you are, not where you used to be. They feel your steadiness. They sense your self-trust. They understand, even without words, that access to you is earned through presence, not pursuit. This is where belief becomes unshakable. You believe in your able. To walk away from what doesn't align. You believe in your capacity to handle discomfort without self-betrayal. You believe that love can be calm and still be deep. That belief rewires what you're available for. You carry this forward relentlessly, into conversations, into decisions, into moments of doubt. You don't abandon yourself to feel wanted. You don't trade peace for proximity. You don't confuse being chosen with being cherished. The story no longer revolves around avoidance. It revolves around embodiment. You embody self-respect. You embody emotional safety. You embody consistency. And that embodiment becomes your filter. What fits stays, what doesn't fades. This is the moment everything locks in, not as motivation, but as identity. You are someone who stays present, someone who chooses clarity, someone who doesn't chase people who fear closeness. That identity shapes every outcome from here on. You are no longer hoping for a return. You are building a future, one grounded decision at a time, one boundary honored, one truth lived. And that future is not fragile, it's resilient. You didn't just learn how to respond to distance, you learned how to lead yourself through it. And that skill changes your life permanently. Because once you know how to stay aligned under pressure, nothing can pull you back into chaos again. This is the end of waiting, the end of wondering, the end of shrinking. You move forward now with clarity, strength, and direction. And from this place, everything you allow into your life must meet you in truth. Now the weight of it all settles into certainty. You are no longer experimenting with change, you are living it. This is where identity hardens into truth, where every choice you make confirms who you are becoming. You don't drift anymore, you decide, and decision creates momentum that nothing external can interrupt. You feel it in how you wake up. There is less heaviness, less mental bargaining. Your energy is no longer split between what is and what could have been. It's focused. And focus is dangerous in the best way. It turns intention into reality. It turns discipline into freedom. The urgency now is about momentum, because momentum is fragile if neglected and unstoppable if protected. You protect it by refusing to reopen doors that cost you clarity. You protect it by not romanticizing the past. You protect it by remembering exactly how far you had to climb to get here. You understand something most people never do. Healing is not passive. It demands loyalty to yourself when comfort tempts you backward. Old connections don't pull you because they're right. They pull you because they're familiar. And familiarity has nothing to do with alignment. You stop negotiating with nostalgia. You don't let memory rewrite reality. You remember the confusion, the instability, the emotional guessing. You remember how much of yourself you lost trying to keep something alive alone. That memory isn't bitterness, it's wisdom. W. Wisdom changes how you move. You no longer rush toward intensity. You respect pacing. You respect consistency. You respect effort over words. Your nervous system recognizes safety now, not as excitement, but as steadiness. That shift rewires attraction at its core. This is where the stakes peak, because this version of you is incompatible with old patterns. You cannot go back without breaking yourself, and you know it. That knowledge keeps you sharp. It keeps you honest. It keeps you anchored when emotions surge. You don't suppress feelings. You master them. You allow them to rise, move, and pass without letting them dictate your behavior. That mastery is power, not loud power, quiet power, the kind that doesn't need validation because it's rooted in self-trust. People feel it when they meet you. There is no chase in your energy, no urgency to be chosen, no fear of being left. You are present without pressure, open without overgiving, interested without attachment. That balance is rare, and rarity commands respect. Your standards are no longer defenses, they are reflections. Reflections of what you've learned, of what you value, of what you refuse to sacrifice again. You don't explain them, you embody them. And embodiment speaks louder than any boundary ever could. If someone meets you halfway, you allow it. If they hesitate, you don't convince, you observe. You let truth reveal itself without interference. That patience filters everything. It saves you time. It saves you inner. It saves you from repeating lessons you already paid for. You start building something bigger than recovery. You build vision, purpose, direction. Your life stops orbiting one connection and starts expanding outward. Goals gain weight. Passions return. You invest in things that grow when you show up, not disappear when you need them. This is where belief locks into action. You act like someone who trusts themselves. You choose environments that support you. You choose people who meet you emotionally. You choose habits that reinforce clarity. Every choice strengthens the foundation beneath you. There is no grand finale here, no dramatic reunion required. The victory is quieter and far more powerful. You no longer feel pulled by what avoids you. You are drawn forward by what aligns with you. That shift changes everything. You stand firmly in who you are now, grounded, clear, self-led. You don't chase energy that runs. You don't wait for consistency. You require it. And because of that, your life becomes cleaner. Your connections become healthier. Your future becomes intentional. This is not the end of desire. It's the end of desperation. Not the end of love, but the end of self-abandonment. You carry this forward into every chapter that follows. And from this place, nothing has the power to destabilize you again. You didn't just move on. You moved up. And everything that comes next must rise to meet you there. Now the final layer of clarity settles, and it is relentless. Why, O can no longer tolerate uncertainty disguised as connection. You can no longer justify inconsistency with hope. Every fiber of your being knows that waiting for someone to change is wasted energy. The life you want demands alignment, not negotiation. And alignment begins inside you. You feel the difference in every choice, every message you don't send, every call you don't make, every impulse to explain yourself that you resist. That resistance is not restraint, it is power. Power over your emotions, power over your actions, power over the story you refuse to let define you. And that power changes the way you exist in the world. The stakes are higher than a return. They are higher than approval. They are the stakes of your identity. Every time you override your own instincts for the sake of connection, you erode your foundation. Every time you honor them, you fortify it. And you have lived long enough to know which choice builds you and which choice breaks you. You no longer react to absence with desperation. You no longer let longing dictate your behavior. You feel it, acknowledge it, and let it move through you. That flow is discipline disguised as emotion. And discipline compounds. It transforms hope into certainty, anxiety into calm, chaos into structure. This is where you see how your presence changes everything. People notice it, even when you say nothing. Your energy is steady. Your attention is contained. Your curiosity is controlled. And that combination is magnetic, not because it seeks attention, but because it radiates stability. Avoidants notice this immediately. They are wired to respond to steadiness, not pursuit. You stop projecting potential onto inconsistency. You stop justifying behaviors that were never aligned with your standards. You stop reinterpreting absence as a test or a challenge. Reality is clear. Behavior is clear. And once you accept clarity, you stop bargaining for connection. You start expecting it. And that expectation comes without need. Your boundaries are no longer reactive. They are proactive. They are the armor of self-respect. You don't explain them. You embody them. They communicate what you will tolerate without a word. That embodiment forces the world to adapt to your integrity. And when you consistently operate from this place, only the connections that belong remain. This is where desire becomes aligned with discipline. You still want connection, but you no longer need it to validate your existence. You still feel love, but you no longer confuse attachment with care. You still hope, but hope is no longer desperate, it is discerning. That discernment reshapes everything you allow into your life. The internal urgency sharpens now because you recognize how fragile progress can be. One misstep, one compromise, one return to old habits, and you risk undoing everything you've built. You honor this urgency. You act with precision. Every decision is deliberate. Every pause intentional. Every boundary reinforced. Your energy now has direction, weight, and consequence. It no longer flows into uncertainty or expectation. It flows toward growth, clarity, and alignment. And that energy attracts what is healthy, repels what is draining, and filters out what is unstable. You have become a magnet for integrity. At this stage, even absence feels different. Silence is no longer painful. It is neutral. It is information. It tells you who is capable of presence and who is not. You no longer chase it, fear it, or fix it. You simply observe it. That observation is liberation. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop mistaking longing for connection. You stop bending yourself to fit someone else's avoidance. Instead, you create space where real connection can exist, and you inhabit that space fully. That is power in its purest form. From here, every decision compounds your strength. Every boundary enforced increases your clarity. Every moment of self-trust reinforces your alignment. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer proving. You are no longer shrinking. You are the standard now. And this standard changes everything. Not just how others approach you, but how you move, how you feel, and how you live. You have built a foundation that no absence, no silence, and no avoidance can destabilize. You have become unshakable. You are no longer defined by who left or who returned. You are defined by who you chose to be when left alone. You are grounded, you are clear, you are whole, and nothing can disappear from you again. The moment you step fully into yourself, everything changes. You feel it in the way you hold your body, in the rhythm of your thoughts, in the steadiness of your breath. You are no longer fragmented by absence. No longer shaken by silence, no longer pulled by uncertainty. You occupy space in the world without apology. And that presence is magnetic. Every impulse to chase, to explain, to plead has dissolved. It has been replaced with awareness and intentionality. You notice when old habits rise and you respond differently. You pause, you breathe, you choose. That pause is your power. That choice is your sovereignty. And every time you act from this place, the old patterns weaken. You stop mistaking intensity for love. You stop believing drama is depth. You stop confusing longing for connection. You understand now that consistency, presence, and emotional regulation are what matter. And you live by that understanding. You enforce it quietly but relentlessly. In every interaction, every decision, every moment, the stakes have never been higher, because this version of yourself is incompatible with chaos. You cannot slip back without compromising everything you've built. That knowledge keeps you sharp. It keeps you honest. It keeps your focus razor thin. And that focus turns every day into progress, every boundary into clarity, every action into alignment. You no longer feel the need to manipulate attention or test love. You no longer sure worth by who stays or who leaves. You no longer tolerate inconsistency disguised as potential. You act with discernment. You give access where it is earned. You protect your energy as if it were precious because it is. This is where freedom crystallizes. You realize that being alone is no longer a punishment. Silence is no longer a threat. Waiting is no longer despair. These states have become tools. You use them to observe, to measure, to recalibrate. You have learned to walk through discomfort without betraying yourself. That ability changes everything. Your energy shifts. You radiate calm, confidence, and self-possession. People sense it instantly. Avoidants notice it before they understand it. They feel steadiness they cannot manipulate. They recognize presence they cannot demand. That recognition is irresistible, not because you seek it, but because you exist fully. You no longer try to convince anyone to stay. You no longer justify your value. You no longer compromise for attention. You operate from self-trust. You operate from clarity. You operate from the certainty that your life has weight and direction, regardless of who returns or who walks away. Every decision compounds your strength. Every boundary reinforces your integrity. Every moment of self-alignment cements your identity. You are no longer defined by absence or pursuit. You are defined by how you maintain yourself in the face of them. And that definition is unshakable. You act from a place where patience is not passive. You wait without need. You observe without anxiety. You respond without fear. You give without abandoning yourself. You love without desperation. You hope without compromise. That is mastery. That is power. That is freedom. You notice the difference it makes. Conversations feel lighter. Connections feel healthier. Decisions feel clearer. You no longer orbit uncertainty. You build forward momentum. You cultivate stability. You reinforce yourself daily. And that momentum is unstoppable once it gains force. You no longer seek validation from absence. You no longer measure worth by return. You no longer bargain for consistency. You have internalized it. You have become it. And that embodiment attracts what is aligned, repels what is not, and filters out everything in between. You understand now that desire does not require desperation. Presence does not require proof. Love does not require chaos. You have built a life where stability, clarity, and integrity are non-negotiable. And from this place, no one's avoidance can dislodge you. You didn't just survive the silence. You transformed it into the foundation of your power. You didn't just outlast the absence. You used it to redefine yourself. You didn't just wait for change. You became the change. And from this place, nothing can pull you back into old patterns again. You are unshakable. You are sovereign. You are fully present. You are whole. And everything that comes next must meet the standard you now live by. This is where the final transformation anchors itself. You no longer bend to patterns that hurt you. You no longer give energy to absence disguised as attention. You no longer confuse emotional scarcity with depth. Every moment now tests your sovereignty, and every time you pass, you reinforce it. Your life becomes a reflection of your choices, not of someone else's availability. You feel the difference in the smallest actions, in not responding instantly, in not justifying your needs, in not hoping that someone's return will validate your worth. Every pause, every boundary, every intentional act compounds into a force that is unshakable. It is invisible to some, undeniable to those who can recognize alignment. Urgency sharpens, but it is internal. It is the urgent demand of your own integrity. Every time you consider stepping backward into old habits, you feel the cost of compromise, the cost of self-abandonment. And that cost is no longer acceptable. You are not willing to pay it ever again. You stop believing that love must be turbulent to be real. You stop measuring attachment by drama or inconsistency. You stop confusing longing with compatibility. Stability is now the standard. Presence is now the measure. Effort is now the currency. And once you operate by these measures, everything else falls away naturally. You watch interactions differently. Absence no longer triggers panic. Silence no longer triggers anxiety. Inconsistency no longer pulls you off balance. You observe, you feel, you respond with clarity. That clarity protects you. It protects your energy. It protects your nervous system. And it attracts people who are capable of presence, not avoidance. You no longer chase connection. You create space for it. And in creating that space, you understand that desire does not require desperation. Love does not require chaos. Attention does not require begging. Your energy becomes calibrated to what is real.